What is up, Midwestern Marx Familia? We're about to get informed, about to have a conversation about Palestine, the ongoing Nakba 2.0, the ongoing mass extermination of the Palestinian people by the Israeli apartheid state that gets $3.8 billion a year from the United States. Hopefully be answering some questions from the audience, break down a few videos, watch a few of the TikToks that I've had recently that have gone viral, and continue to educate ourselves about what's going on and continue to spread the word and help educate other people about what the Israeli apartheid state's doing and what they've always been all about. So we'll get right into it after the intro. All right, friends. It's actually been a while since we've done a stream. I noticed there was a comment on one of my recent videos, which was just I re-uploaded one of the TikToks I had done. Somebody said, I miss Eddie in long form. Miss the long form content. I'm like, I know, but for one, I've been training for a wrestling event that went down this weekend and went really well. We'll discuss that. I want to show you guys the match. I just don't know if I'm allowed to, because this is technically a subscription service. You got to have a subscription to this website to watch this match. So I don't know if it's illegal for me to show it to you. I feel like if I contacted them, they really wouldn't care, but I have not done that. But anyways, I've been training for that. Plus, I mean, if people, I know a lot of people in the YouTube audience don't even have TikTok or don't mess with TikTok, and I don't blame you. I don't really use TikTok other than to post. But for those who have been paying attention to the TikTok, you know that we've been getting millions upon millions of views and around 50,000 new followers to Midwestern Marx, actually more than 50,000 new followers to Midwestern Marx, many new subscribers on the YouTube. So as you know, this ongoing imperialist action is going on with the Zionist apartheid state of Israel trying to exterminate the Palestinians and quell the Palestinian resistance. With the support of the U.S., there's an ongoing information war, right? The corporate media, the propagandists are trying to manufacture consent, invent reality, push Americans towards supporting this. And for once, it's difficult for them to do so. For once, there's a huge mass of people who are educated about Palestine, who know the historical context of this issue, and are refusing to buy into the Israeli propaganda, to buy into the corporate media narrative and the corporate media garbage. So from my perspective, I felt like my voice, I guess, can be best used by making these TikTok videos that are getting millions of views. And we're going to cover today, there have literally, and this is a great honor to me in the Midwestern Marx community, there have literally been Zionist conferences with Israeli strategists where they are playing Midwestern Marx TikToks and discussing how do we counter this? How do we counter this propaganda to get people to support the apartheid state of Israel? So I figured since those videos are getting millions of views and they're helping to fight this information war against the empire and against the apartheid state, that is where I should put my energy. However, now that I'm done training for that wrestling tournament and have a little bit more time on my hands, I wanted to do some long form streams too, because these are also important. Love what Jackson is doing right now. Yeah, I wanted to cover this. I've been wanting to make like a tweet about it or something, but I don't know. Tweets are so short, it's hard. But there are a lot of people who are like, Jackson's evil. Quit liking Jackson's tweets. Quit retweeting Jackson's tweets. And I'm like, dude, you can have your disagreements with Jackson and Jackson's positions on social issues, or you could argue that Jackson doesn't have the deepest understanding of Marxist theory for someone who calls himself a Marxist Leninist, but he is getting millions and millions and millions of views exposing the Israeli apartheid state and standing up explicitly for Palestinians and for the Palestinian liberation struggle, which is, of course, the Marxist-Leninist position on this. So why are people so upset about someone getting millions and millions and millions of views pushing the Marxist-Leninist position? It's like so many leftists don't want to win, right? They don't want to win. They don't want to be popular. They just want to remain in this little echo chamber of leftists who already agree. It's like, dude, he's getting the message out. Yeah, he's getting the message out to people who you may disagree with on 99% of other things, but at least he's getting the message out. At least he's pushing the right position. So I'm in support of that. I've been liking and been retweeting his content when I agree with it, which in the case of Israel Palestine is 99.9% of the time I agree with what he's saying. So he's a clout demon for real. He may be, but seems to be working. YouTube shorts are great, definitely. I should get more in the short game. The problem is YouTube shorts have to be like Instagram reels can be whatever you want, right? However long you want for the, or maybe not however long you want, but they can be like 2 minutes. YouTube shorts have to be under a minute. So if I have a TikTok that's over a minute, I can't upload it as a YouTube short. But the only content that's monetized for us on TikTok, and the content that I feel like TikTok actually boosts and puts on people's For You page, is content that's over a minute. So I usually stretch most of my TikTok videos to over a minute, which I don't think is a bad thing. TikTok probably destroys kids' attention spans, and I'm glad to be able to counteract that at least a little bit. But then I can't upload those as YouTube shorts, so that's a bummer. But great for memes. Yes, great for memes. Like the stream. Yes, please like the stream. Please, please, please. It gives me hope that I want to cry, but I'm here at work. I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, you can really see with the recent events that public opinion is turning, and it makes you wonder how close public opinion is to turning against the empire in general. Like, these are pretty unprecedented events in terms of how many people, like, if you look at Twitter right now, everything Joe Biden puts out in favor of the state of Israel and Israel's actions is just getting lambasted. He's getting literally ratioed oftentimes by people like Henkel. So it's pretty crazy to see how much public opinion is turning against the ruling class, and I hope that continues. And what we got to do is expose the systemic underpinnings that are driving imperialism and driving the U.S. to prop up the Zionist apartheid regime. Because what a lot of people think this is, unfortunately, is they think it's a battle between Jewish people and Muslim people. I saw someone post today like, oh, all the wars are started by religion. Religion started all these wars. No, the U.S. doesn't care. When jihadist extremist groups, when Muslim extremist groups are willing to serve the U.S.'s interests, protect Western multinational corporations and U.S. geopolitical interests, the U.S. will dump money and funds into them all day. They dump money and funds into the Mujahideen. They help prop up ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups in Syria, in Libya, right? They don't care what religion you are. They care about economics. They care about controlling resources. They care about wealth. They care about controlling labor and having access to cheap labor that can keep their profits high, that can keep their surplus value high, that can keep the accumulation of capital going. And that is what Israel protects in the Middle East for the U.S. That's why they call Israel the only democracy in the Middle East, because Israel protects the interests of Western multinational corporations, and they serve the U.S.'s geopolitical interests. They constantly launch missiles at the U.S.'s enemies, Iran, Syria, etc. So for that reason, the U.S. props up Israel with over $8 billion a year and a bunch of covert funding to Mossad and stuff like that. It's because of capitalist imperialism. It's because the U.S. is dominated by multinational corporations who have an interest in extracting all the oil out of the Middle East. It's not because the U.S. hates Muslim people and they love Jewish people, right? If there was a Muslim extremist group that would do the same thing Israel's doing, the U.S. would have no problem backing them. And in fact, Israel helped the U.S. back a lot of Muslim extremist groups in Syria, groups like ISIS, which is hilarious because Israel is now saying the Palestinians are equivalent to ISIS. Hamas is ISIS. You're the ones who backed ISIS. Who's the real ISIS here? Excuse me. Where do you think the next hot war involving the U.S. will be? Seems like the State Department's itching to fight Iran, Russia, China, etc. Yeah, there was some higher up the other day in the State Department or whatever said the U.S. can fight a war with Hamas, Russia, and China at the same time or something. It's like, what? You really think the U.S. can do that? And you really think that's a good idea? You think that's a good idea for us to fight every country in the world who is gaining a little bit of economic power at once? Just fight them all at once and destroy them. I don't know how that's going to work, guys, but we'll see. Have you heard Norm's analysis of abolitionist response to slave revolts? At the time, it's at around the 20-minute mark. The 20-minute mark of what? I have heard him say that, though. I had a discussion about this with someone. Oh, I see. You sent me a link. I can't click on links from StreamYards, unfortunately, Sebastian. I'll try and find that, though. But yeah, I had a conversation with StreamYards, unfortunately, Sebastian. And Finkelstein framing this like slave rebellion is perfect. His framing of this as a slave rebellion is absolutely perfect because that's what it is. It's people who are trapped in an open-air prison, people who are systematically deprived of their rights, people who don't have access to clean drinking water, who are rebelling against the colonizing power, the oppressing power. And when we do, everyone screams, terrorists, terrorists, terrorists. And, now we look back at things like Nat Turner's slave rebellion as great, great deeds, amazing events. Of course, why wouldn't they rebel against slavery? Why wouldn't John Brown and, the abolitionists violently rebel against the slave owners? Of course, this was justified. We look back and we say that now, but we don't realize at the time that there were a lot of people against this. There were a lot of people who hated John Brown and called him a radical, or a lot of people who hated Nat Turner and said, you slaves need to quit violently rebelling. You slaves need to quit taking up arms against your colonizers, against your oppressors. You're being terrorists, right? There were a lot of people like that at the time. There were a lot of David Packmans at the time who said this isn't the right way to end slavery. This isn't the right way to end apartheid, right? We need to do it slowly through voting. These people have existed always. So here's the Norman Finkelstein video that Sebastian was mentioning there.
But there was something there that was smart. What they would have said, but that only got me so far. And then I sat down and I thought, okay, let me go back to what the abolitionists said when there were the slave revolts in the United States, because the slave revolts here and other places were quite ugly affairs. If we're talking about, targeting of civilians and things like that. And I don't hold personally, but I did know that Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, they held the abolitionists in very high regard. Charles Sumner, Wendell Phillips, William Lloyd Garrison. When you read Douglass and when you read Du Bois,
sorry, just trying to.
They will not brook any criticism of those abolitionists and the heights they soared, S-O-A-R-E-D, in their defense of African Americans, Blacks who were enslaved. And so I looked at the Nat Turner Rebellion, which was the largest slave rebellion in the United States. And of course, there were, when you look at it, there were some eerie similarities. Nat Turner was a religious fanatic. Incidentally, often forgotten, so was John Brown. Each of them, but we'll stick now to Nat Turner, each of them was convinced that they were acting on God's word, that they were agents of God, and they were doing God's will, and their actions were sanctioned by God. You might call it.
And this is what I was saying earlier on Twitter. Like, yeah, Midwestern Marx doesn't agree with Hamas's ideology. We don't share the same worldview as Hamas. That's not the point. That doesn't matter. We understand the origins of Hamas. We understand why there's an armed Muslim nationalist resistance in Palestine, because they're being genocided, because they're being ethnically cleansed, because the West Bank is occupied by Israeli settlers who kill one Palestinian child a day before any of the most recent conflicts started going down, the so-called Israel-Hamas war. They were killing one child a day before that. And they've trapped people in Gaza in an open-air prison where 97% of the water is undrinkable. So yeah, we don't share the exact same ideology as Hamas. That's not the point. The point is that we understand that armed resistance to colonialism, stemmed from years of colonialism and oppression and apartheid and super exploitation, which has been sponsored every step of the way by the British and the United States, because they want a neo-colonial outpost to guard all the oil for them in the Middle East. And that's what Israel is, and that's what Israel does. Right? So for you as a white Westerner to just be like, have your whole analysis of this issue just be Hamas bad, Hamas bad, Hamas bad. Dude, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Look at what created Hamas. What created Hamas is the settler colonialism and the ethnic extermination of Arab Palestinians that's been going on for over 70 years.
Them premature jihadis. That's what they were. And it's reported in Stephen Oates' account. He's a very respected historian, still among us. In Stephen Oates' account of the Nat Turner Rebellion, that Nat Turner gave the order to his Confederates, kill all whites. Part of it was revenge, for sure, but part of it, he wanted to create a moral crisis, to force the country to confront the reality of slavery. He was, by the way, a very smart guy, like Frederick Douglass, very literate, and constantly acknowledged by whites for his intelligence. So he was a zealot, but also very smart. And by the way, so is John Brown. There's very few an academic that could write prose like those folks could back then, because they were schooled in the Bible and everything, so they knew the English language. In any event, as I said, they said to kill all whites. In the case of the Nat Turner Rebellion, they killed about 70 whites, total innocents, men, women, by the current term, innocent, civilians, men, women, and children. So as I was reading about Nat Turner, I just mentioned in passing, but I'll get back to Nat Turner. When I read John Brown, I was very curious because he killed civilians too. Padua told me he hacked to death the civilians. I was very interested in what was both Frederick Douglass gave this absolutely breathtaking speech on John Brown, and he had to come to grips with the question of killing civilians. And Du Bois wrote a biography of John Brown, not very good, but I don't think there aren't many resources to draw from. He too, in the last chapter, confronts the question of John Brown and the killing of civilians. Neither of them condemned Brown. They circled around it. They recognized they had to confront this question, but they wouldn't condemn John Brown for killing civilians. So when it came to Nat Turner, I was curious what the abolitionists had to say about that. You can imagine it created complete hysteria, the Nat Turner rebellion. The whites in the South just went on a murderous, the same as what's happening now in Gaza, but obviously on a small.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy, the parallels? There's a slave rebellion, and the whites in the Confederate South lost their mind and just started murdering black people. Sounds a whole lot like the Zionist Israeli settlers today.
Well, scale because of relative population. So I was curious to read what William Lloyd Garrison had to say. And I'll tell you, it was so important for me to read that because I refused, and I'm going to be perfectly honest about it, I refused to condemn Hamas. It was too easy. It was too easy to condemn them. And I looked to Garrison. What did he do? And I'll tell you now, my regard for the abolitionists went through the roof when I read what Garrison wrote. He acknowledged the horror had occurred, but he very studiously, carefully would not condemn the Nat Turner Rebellion. He condemned all the hypocrites who were condemning the rebellion. And he said, we told you so. We told you so. We warned you, we warned you, we warned you that you were going to drive these people mad and they're going to do something, horrible. And I read it and I reread it and I reread it. And then in the past couple of days, I had to refresh my memory of my own book. And I started to reread my book, the Gaza book, The Inquest into Its Martyrdom. And I'm telling you, honest to God, I began to get so filled with rage as I went through each detail of what was done to those people that two things. Number one, I understood now why Garrison did not condemn the rebellion. Because he saw day in and day out. Unlike Gaza, slavery was not out of sight. He saw day in and day out the humiliation, the degradation, the physical assault.
And this is something, too. A lot of people weren't paying attention to Gaza and weren't paying attention to Palestine until it was on the evening news, until it was on Good Morning America, until it was reported by the mainstream corporate media who were like, look at this terrible terrorist attack by Hamas, right? Because Gaza and Palestine are out of sight and out of mind for most Americans because it's not reported on by the corporate media. But those of us who follow it closely, those of us who follow independent journalists or people like James Ray on TikTok who covers Gaza and Palestine every day, or at least every week, we've been seeing children get massacred in this region on a daily basis for years. We've been seeing new settlements be built and Palestinian homes be demolished and children and women and civilians forced off their land. More and more and more. We've seen the conditions deteriorate in the Gaza Strip where people are packed in and kept in an open-air prison. They constantly have missiles dropped on their heads, paid for by the U.S., by the Israeli apartheid regime. We've seen the UN report and the Amnesty International report saying that Israel is an apartheid state, which systematically deprives Palestinian Arabs of very basic human rights, political rights, civil rights, any kind of right. We've seen this go on day after day. So when the Palestinian people rise up, when a group like Hamas rises up and fights back and breaks out of the open-air prison and fights back against the Israeli occupying forces, we're like, no shit, duh. What did you think was going to happen? What did you think was going to happen when you forced 75% of these people into refugee status? And the ones who stuck around, the ones who are still there, you started dropping bombs on their children, on their brothers, on their sisters. You didn't think they were going to be mad. You didn't think they were going to fight back against you. Are you stupid? But what the corporate media does is remove all historical context, right? They remove all the context of Israeli settler colonialism and the seizure of the land. They remove the Nakba. And their narrative is just, oh, Hamas terrorist attack. This uprising came out of nowhere because these Muslim extremist people are so crazy and so violent. They have to isolate these events from the historical factors that created them in order to brainwash people. Because if anybody actually studies the history of Palestine and the history of the Israeli apartheid state, they're going to find themselves strongly against Israel. What's up, Cade Grenade? Thanks for becoming a 6-month member. Greatly appreciate you, brother. Sounds like a cool research project you got going on there.
On the people, the African American slaves, and he realized he could not, in good conscience, condemn them for what they did. And then after I started to read my own book, and the rage inside of me, I was sitting in a restaurant yesterday because I didn't want to sit at home doing it because I sort of, lose it. So I started to read it. And then as I read it, I said, Norman, I'm very unpopular because of what I said in those first couple of days. When I lost a couple of close friends over it. But I determined Garrison was right. I don't know what Professor Chomsky would have said. I know right after 9/11, he called it an atrocity of a large magnitude, and then he went on to focus on what caused the magnitude. As a journalist says, the background story of why they did what they did.
So you got to ask what caused it. That's very interesting. I really like that framing. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, how far can you push a group of people before they take up arms and fight back? I saw some people, saw some conservatives saying this is why people need to have guns. This is why the Israeli settlers need to be armed, and why their government, didn't give them firearms protections, and that's why this is happening. And how sad is it? And this shows why Americans should never give up our guns. It's like, well, what about the Palestinian people? The armed Palestinians who are fighting back against colonialism. Why don't you gun rights activists in America stand up for them? But dude, the conservative grifters, the conservative pundits have just been all over the place with Israel Palestine. They don't know what to do with themselves. They're just so stupid and so historically illiterate. It's really hard. They're just taking the most random positions. If anyone follows the typical liberal, that's a conservative Trump Instagram account I follow that is just all over the place with his takes. They pretend to be like for free speech too, and they're calling for anyone who stands with Palestine to be censored. Like, what is this? I thought you were a MAGA communist, Eddie. Oh yeah, good point. Sorry. All right, so let's cover this. These are the Zionists who recently had a strategic conference where they mentioned me.
So I just learned that a bunch of
TikToks in Midwestern Marx. So here's the original video where I explained this Zionist strategist meeting that was going down. This got like 225,000 views or so. It's kind of self-explanatory. I'll play it.
So I just learned that a bunch of pro-apartheid activists are having a conference on the 19th to figure out how to defeat anti-Israel activists. And you can register at proisraelaction.com. So, it sure would be a shame if a bunch of pro-Palestinian people signed up for this and then flooded their Zoom meeting and told them that they're a bunch of apartheid-supporting fools. Just an idea. Just putting that out there since, those people support the mass murder of children. And this is a conference to see how they can better justify the mass murder of children and silence people who are against it. Hope you guys are proud of yourselves. Way to use your intellect for evil.
So I have a feel this got 225,000 views. Like I said, I think what happened, I wasn't there because I had that wrestling tournament going on. Well, I'm pretty sure what happened is a lot of people from our audience, pro-Palestinian people, flooded the Zoom meeting and signed up for the Zoom meeting. So, they had to vet it. They had to make sure that nobody got into the Zoom meeting except for their scheduled speakers. But I'm sure people were just commenting, free Palestine, you support an apartheid regime, Israel's an illegal apartheid state, all the stuff that we know is true. That triggers Zionists because they don't want people knowing the truth. They don't want people understanding the reality of the Israeli apartheid state. So after that happened, they kind of freaked out, and this was caught on video by another TikToker.
So guys,
I saw this, and it just blew my mind. Like, this is one of the funniest things that's happened in the history of Midwestern Marx. So this features clips from the actual conference that they had. after I made that video calling it out.
Pro-Palestinian TikTok content is making Zionists and Israeli strategists very angry. This is from a recent strategic meeting that they had, which I told you guys about last week.
Small group of activists, those who put on the TikTok, those who sent me anti-Semitic messages, those who sent others, are a small group with no decency.
Look how... Oh, look how mad that boy is. Look how mad that Zionist boy is. Oh, sorry, buddy. Sorry, buddy. I'm not actually sorry, though. They have no decency. These people on the TikTok have no decency. They're making fun of me for supporting the murder of 700 children. They're attacking me and criticizing me for shutting off the electricity and water to Gazan children. There's no decency. Zionists are so used to the lapdog corporate media. Just always treats them like they're right and always treats Israel like they're acting in self-defense. And then when anybody says the truth, when anybody says the reality, like, nah, you guys are an apartheid state that keeps children trapped in an open-air prison and launches missiles at their heads, they're like, how could you? You have no decency.
Oh yeah, you guys want us to treat you with decency and kindness when you're mass murdering civilians and children. Give me a break. And our community is not anti-Semitic. We are against the Israeli apartheid state and the genocide that they are inflicting on the Palestinian people. There are plenty of Jewish people who also stand against the Israeli apartheid state. It's not anti-Semitic to reject colonialism. It's not anti-Jewish people who...
This guy's awesome, by the way. This is one of the very first people that I listen to when it comes to Israel-Palestine, because when I started speaking out about it, Zionists kept calling me anti-Semitic. Then I found this guy named Ronnie Barkan, who's lived in Israel, who is a Jewish man, who says, you know, every single Jewish person should be against Zionism, because Zionism is a distortion of the Jewish religion. They're taking the Jewish religion and saying that, you know, you should have to, if you're Jewish, you need to support this murderous apartheid state that systematically describes Arab people from their human rights. He's saying this is a complete distortion of our religion and the use of our religion to justify murderous imperialism and colonialism, and calls for every Jewish person to stand against the Israeli apartheid state.
Also stand against the Israeli apartheid state. It's not anti-Semitic to reject colonialism.
This is a conference to see how they can better justify the...
So look, this is their conference and they're playing my video. They're watching my video at their little Zoom conference. Let's go.
Mass murder of children and silence people who are against it.
I mean, that's just a great example of what we've faced. That one TikTok has 25,000 views.
No, it has 225,000 views, actually.
Somewhere.
They're complaining that my video got 25,000 views when it actually got 225,000 views. Sorry about it, Zionists. Sorry that your lies aren't working anymore and we're too powerful for you.
The narrative is just so outrageous, right? So you're talking about a situation where literally Hamas butchered children.
No, they didn't. The reports on that are completely unverified, and they come from one IDF soldier who told it to one Israeli reporter. Meanwhile, hundreds of children and babies have been killed in the Gaza Strip by Israeli missile strikes, which is all funded by $3.8 billion in American tax money every year. What's actually a ridiculous narrative is saying that Israel is only fighting Hamas and they're not targeting civilians.
And that video was kind of a highlight of some of the ways that this new type of political organizing is taking place.
You bet it is. Glad you guys finally said something true. The younger generation is getting educated and we're getting organized. We're no longer going to be fooled by propaganda into supporting this. We know that Israel is an apartheid state, which systematically deprives Palestinian Arabs of basic human and political rights. We know that Gaza is an open-air prison where Israel fires missiles indiscriminately or even targets civilian areas. And we know that our government gives them $3.8 billion a year to do this. And we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to be tricked by the propaganda anymore. You guys can no longer demand that we treat you with decency and completely buy into your narrative when you're killing hundreds of children. We're just too smart for you. I'm sorry. The truth is winning now. I'm not actually sorry. So guys,
So yeah, we infiltrated the Zionist strategic meeting, and we hashtag triggered them. Nobody gets more triggered than a Zionist when somebody says something true about Israel. But that's awesome. I mean, that shows, for real, that shows the actual effect that we're having, you know, the actual importance of this kind of political activism and fighting the information war. Thank you for putting this out there. Definitely, definitely. Eddie, did you talk about the old hostage that got released? I haven't yet, but I shared a video on TikTok about it, and then I actually shared it with my parents because my mom originally was talking about a grandma who was taken hostage by Hamas, and I basically sent my mom an entire novel saying, "You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Stop talking about this. Watch these movies, please." And then she messaged me later. She's like, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea what I was talking about. I am an ignorant American. Gazan kids are living in garbage. And everything that you've been telling us about this conflict is true." She watched Gaza Fights for Freedom and then another one. But anyways, the old lady who was captured by Hamas was released and said that they treated her with respect and that they took care. They were extremely clean and sanitary, and that the Hamas fighters ate the exact same thing that the hostages ate, right? And they actually treated them well. And the media tried to distort this. The headlines were written like, Hamas hostage relives trauma. Hamas hostage relives terrifying moments. And, tried to cover up the actual substance of the article, which was this grandma saying, "Nah, Hamas actually treated me pretty well." And what's so ridiculous is there are hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians sitting in Israeli prisons, sitting in Israeli jail cells who are never talked about, who are never discussed. And these are people who have been put in jail without trial, hundreds of people who've been put in jail without trial, or that, it's just been corrupt Israeli courts ruling that any Arab Palestinian, can be locked away. So these aren't called hostages. The media doesn't freak out about these people. The media doesn't say a peep about these people because it doesn't serve their interest, because they don't actually care about individual hostages. They only care about making Hamas and Palestine look bad and Israel look good. Wait till Americans hear what their government did to the DPRK. True, we did kill 20% of the DPRK's population. And yeah, I hope people see that. I hope people don't think this is a one-off event, because there are so many people who are woke about Palestine and who are, understand what's going on and understand what the Israeli apartheid state is doing. But I hope they see that this is a pattern, right? That the reason the U.S. props up Israel is because of capitalist imperialism, because the U.S. needs someone to protect their economic and political interests in the Middle East. They're not just doing it because they feel like it or because Joe Biden's a bad guy, right? There are systemic reasons that push the capitalist imperialists to support an entity like the Zionist apartheid state of Israel. And there are reasons that stem from production, that stem from economics, that stem from surplus value in the accumulation of capital. Same reason they didn't want a communist government in Korea. Same reason they propped up a fascist dictatorship in the South and then killed 20% of North Korea's population. They wanted to protect Western multinational or Western economic interests in the Korean Peninsula. Vietnam lost 3 million people, and how many more thanks to lasting damage from Vietnam during the war? Yeah, I mean, countless examples we could go through, not just of the U.S. killing millions of civilians to protect their economic and political interests, but also the U.S. siding with fascists, the U.S. siding with far-right extremist groups who are in favor of their interests. They did that in Vietnam. They did that in Korea, propping up Syngman Rhee's fascist dictatorship. They're doing that in Israel, propping up the fascistic Zionists. And of course, they did that in Ukraine, backing groups like Right Sector and the Azov Battalion and all these others. So the U.S. has no problem siding with fascists when it favors their interests. Pinochet in Chile, another great example. Great as in it's a good example of what I'm talking about, but he was not a great person at all. Murdered thousands of people in the National Soccer Stadium before he went to tea with Margaret Thatcher. Like, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. Fascists team up with other fascists too. Where can I learn more about the systemic reasons as a beginner? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me this, my friend. I'm so glad. The best thing you can read is a book from 1917 called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism by Lenin. That's where you need to start. But if you don't have that book, there's a free PDF online. But if you hate to read, there is a reading guide and summary fully completed by Midwestern Marx. And I've got an updated version that I'm working on. That one's not completed. But I have a full reading guide and breakdown of Lenin's imperialism, not just a reading guide, but a full summary of the book and every concept that Lenin touches on in the book. And I try and take the book and apply it to modern day. Say, this is what Lenin's talking about. Here's how it's developed. Here's how it's evolved. Here's how it's changed. And here's how that concept can be applied today. Basically, what Lenin's imperialism says is that capitalism develops, and as it does, capital accumulates and becomes concentrated at the top. There's a handful of bankers and shareholders and industrial capitalists who own all the wealth, right? And then after that, the military-industrial complex develops as well. So you have capitalists who literally make money off of selling weapons. They make money off of keeping wars going, which kind of adds to what Lenin writes about in this book. But anyways, he says after capital has become or has concentrated at the top and monopolies have taken control of the capitalist economies in European countries and America and the major capitalist powers, Russia was at the time as well, the capitalists begin going abroad and trying to super exploit other countries, like the British trying to super exploit India and trying to super exploit the Irish and trying to super exploit Kenya. And the U.S. fighting the Spanish-American War to try and get all these Latin American and Central American colonies that they can super exploit and extract cheap resources from, which leads to even higher profits, lower production costs, higher profits. So in that way, capitalism spurs imperialism. After capitalism reaches a certain stage of development, all the capitalists go abroad and begin fighting each other for the colonies. And this is what leads to World War I and World War II. These are capitalist powers fighting each other essentially over the colonies and over geopolitical and economic dominance. Well, not so much World War II, because you have the socialist Soviet Union being the main force fighting off the fascistic German imperialists. But either way, this kind of this kind of imperialist aggression and imperialist expansion all stems from capitalism and the lust for surplus value, the lust that capitalists have for surplus value and profits. And you can see this with all the imperialist actions abroad. The U.S. only gets mad at a country, only starts targeting a country once that country goes against their economic and political interests. It all stems from maintaining economic dominance, maintaining control over resources and labor, which is the Marxist worldview, right? Marx says that everything stems from production, the way that we organize production and the way that production of goods and services is carried out. And under capitalism, production is organized by capitalists who are trying to maximize their own profits, drive down production costs, and maximize profits. And they can do that by super exploiting cheap resources and cheap labor abroad. This is why capitalists famously use sweatshops in Indonesia and stuff like that. But if a government in Indonesia came to power, which has happened in the past, that says no more sweatshops, right? Our workers are going to have better rights and better conditions, and we're going to invest our own country's wealth in building our country up. That's when the U.S. does a coup. That's when the U.S. launches a war. That's when the U.S. launches a regime change effort, because they want to continue to control the economy of that country, which means controlling the politics of that country too. And if the country's workers start to build a socialist economy or build a socialist system, or not even a socialist system, if they start to nationalize any kind of industry that Western multinationals are profiting off of, That's when the U.S. gets involved. That's when you see sanctions. That's when you see coups. That's when you see regime change efforts. That's when you see bombing campaigns. And what Israel helps the U.S. to do is protects all their all their interests in the Middle East. They attack Iran all the time. They attack Syria all the time. They look out for the interests of Western multinational corporations. So that's capitalist imperialism. I recommend you watch the whole reading guide. I always say this. I studied politics for 4 years in undergrad. And no book helped the world make sense more than Lenin's Imperialism, which was written in 1917. And yes, parts of it are out of date, right? Yes, parts of it need to be updated. Yes, finance capital plays an even bigger role. Like since Lenin wrote that book, World War II happened and it left the U.S. as the dominant power on the global stage. So rather than all these competing smaller imperialist powers that Lenin writes about, you have one dominant hegemonic imperialist power in the United States, which then develops these financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank that help them to enforce U.S. economic and geopolitical dominance globally. And that's what, where we get sort of U.S. unipolarity and U.S. hegemonic dominance. But it's the same capitalist imperialism that Lenin's writing about, right? The same processes and the same protecting of capital accumulation and the same super exploitation of colonized countries that Lenin writes about in 1917 is what the U.S. is trying to do in 2023, right? We still live in capitalism, and we still live in this stage of capitalist imperialism where capitalists control the government and use the government and the military and the police to try and maximize their surplus value. State and Revolution is another good one to read that'll help you understand these concepts. And I also have a full reading guide and summary of State and Revolution on the YouTube channel. So there you go. There you go. That was a long rant about Lenin's imperialism, but it is my favorite book. So by a lot. Is Ross still here? Ross Iron Coil? I really hope Ross is still here because I wanted to cover something from Ross's blog. Ross is a longtime follower of Midwestern Marx, one of our number one supporters, someone who constantly gives financially to Midwestern Marx too. Really appreciate Ross, and I know he reads almost everything we put out, enjoys commentary from me, Carlos, and Noah. We're just a supporter of the whole collective, right? And he has a blog called World in Great Darkness, and I read it pretty frequently. One, because Ross is a good writer. Two, because he often mentions me and Midwestern Marx in his articles. So it's really, really interesting for me to see somebody engaging with the kind of content that I put out on a daily basis, and kind of giving their take on it. And this was the most interesting thing that I've seen Ross write, at least from my perspective. So this is called Naive, and it's a response to the events going on in Palestine, but also the response to these events from political commentators in America and in the West. So I have been so naive. I had thought that those others whose opinion I hold in great regard were perhaps exaggerating. I thought maybe that in the neoliberal regimes in which many of us exist, in particularly neoliberalism molded vessel of social media, where personal advertising and identity are unavoidable prerequisites for communication, that maybe overly intense, overly emphatic, overly vivid language is just par course. I was wrong. Apparently things are just as bad, just as malign, and just as dumb and predictable as my mentors make out. In the political commentary and education outlets I follow on social media, Midwestern Marx et al., I encounter a perspective which says that when push comes to shove with regards to the projects of Western imperialism, an entire spectrum of the commentariat from ultra-left to extreme right falls in line to support them. I had doubted it. I am not on, never have been, and serious brain injury aside, never will be on Twitter. My doubts are now dissolved. The ongoing campaign by the ethno-nationalist regime of Israel, Western imperialism's creature, to finish off in an act of genocide that began 70 years ago in the slaughter and dispossession of the people of Palestine, has one way or the other been excused or rendered complicated. Like, fuck, it's complicated. or in any case, it's been ideologically enabled from the hysterical BS on the far left who even bother to turn their attention from their otherwise continuous shouting about America, Trump, Nazi, burn the flag, land black, blah, blah, blah. Which far left ironically sympathize with, if not expressly, than in running interference for actual Nazis in the Kiev regime. So I just thought this was interesting that Ross felt that he was being a little bit naive about all these political voices on, the left and the right. But the reason that we say this, the reason that we say all these political commentators line up behind imperialist projects when push comes to shove, when imperialism's actually trying to do something abroad, is because this is what I've experienced time and time and time again. The feeling that Ross is conveying in this article of naivety, where all these people who gave lip service to anti-imperialism and pretended to be against imperialism, pretended to be against the U.S., and screamed about Republicans, fascists, America, burn the flag, America terrible. All of these people, when it actually comes time to support an anti-imperialist movement, when it comes time to take an anti-imperialist position, they fail. They line up behind the imperialists. Right? The first time this happened to me was with SOS Cuba. The U.S. was doing this regime change color revolution attempt in Cuba and trying to pretend that it was progressive, trying to pretend that it was a struggle for liberation against the evil Cuban communists. And I said, this is just a color revolution attempt. All these socialists, all these leftists, all these people who pretended to be anti-imperialists attacked me and mass reported my account and made negative videos about me and got us banned for the first time. That was when our account got banned for the first time. Next time our account got banned, guess what? It was the Russian special military operation. Same exact thing. All these people who purported to be woke, who purported to understand how the media works and how they manufacture consent or invent reality or whatever term you want to use, all of a sudden fell for the corporate media's framing, hook, line, and sinker. All of a sudden, they had no criticism of the corporate media, and they joined in screaming Russia bad, Putin bad, Midwestern Marx bad. Right? It's what happens every single time when push comes to shove. When it actually comes time to take an anti-imperialist position against the U.S. corporate media and what the imperialist media is saying, all these people fail to do so. All these people fall into the wrong position and show to have no backbone. So I just thought that was really interesting that Ross basically noticed the same thing that I did. Where all of these so-called leftists, these so-called anti-imperialists, when the media is beating the war drums, they side with the corporate media and with the empire. And then this is a concept that I've thought of, that Carlos really likes, called imperialism or anti-imperialism in hindsight. 10 years from now, all these people will change their position, right? There were all these people who were in favor of the Iraq war after 9/11, but, years later, as more information was released and as we found out that Iraq was based on lies and it killed millions of people and, the people who did 9/11 weren't even in Iraq. The Iraqi government had nothing to do with 9/11, nor did they have weapons of mass destruction. All of a sudden, these people changed their tune, and all of a sudden they're against the Iraq war now, 10 years after it happened. It's like, oh, well, that's real helpful, because when they were trying to lie the American public into supporting Iraq, you were going along with it. You trusted everything the corporate media said. You repeated the lies about WMDs and repeated the lies about us needing to go over there and teach them a lesson for 9/11. So, yeah, thanks a lot for being against the Iraq war 10 years after you cheered it on. Thanks so much for being an anti-imperialist in hindsight. That's easy. That's easy. What's hard is going against the war machine when the corporate media is beating the war drums and when they're using atrocity propaganda to try and justify some murderous intervention. And that's where so many people fall short. So many people like liberal or social democratic commentator David Pakman. Watch this ridiculous. Oh, better hide my messages. Watch this ridiculous coverage.
Water was shut off. I was against that. It's back on thanks to Joe Biden. Reminds us of the importance of who we elect president. Do you believe that Trump would have pressured Israel to turn the Gazan water back on.
By the way, Gaza's water is still off. So I made a TikTok about this, and I'm like, you guys frame everything in a way that makes Joe Biden look good. Joe Biden's sponsoring a genocide that's killed over 700 children and over 3,000 or 5,000 civilians in Gaza. Well, at least he didn't turn the water off. Or at least he told Netanyahu to turn the water back on. He's still a good guy. We still got to vote for him. You know, as if that wasn't ridiculous enough. The water in Gaza is still off. People are still drinking disgusting, unsanitary water. As, you know, humanitarian aid, they're trying to rush it into Gaza so people don't die of dehydration or starvation. But the water's still off, and he's patting Biden on the back for saying we should turn the water back on, saying we have to vote for Joe Biden because he kind of, you know, he said that we should turn the water back on, even though it's still not back on, rather than focusing his coverage about how Joe Biden is doing a genocide. So somebody pointed that out to me. I made a video criticizing Pac-Man, and someone in the comments said the water's still off. So I don't even know what the hell he's talking about.
Back on. No. Reminds us of the importance of who we elect here. There was this 24-hour warning given to Gazans to leave. Of course, leave to go where? They can go south, but obviously Egypt doesn't want them crossing the border either. So it was a pretty wild situation. However, the 24 hours went by. As of this moment, there has not been this massive ground assault, which is good.
Because they know that they're going to lose. They don't want to do a ground assault because they don't want to actually fight Hamas head on because they know that they'll lose. So instead, they choose to sit back behind their U.S.-funded weapons and launch them at kids and launch them at children.
Because I would be against that. But hundreds of thousands of Palestinians did move south, even though Hamas, completely disregarding their safety, said simply stay.
It's Hamas's fault. So he starts it with, you got to vote for Joe Biden because he's doing genocide better than Trump would be doing genocide, and then ends it with, this is all Hamas's fault. Yeah, Israel's indiscriminately carpet bombing Palestinian civilians with missiles that were handed to them by the U.S. government, by our government. But this is Hamas's fault somehow. This is Hamas's fault because they told people to stay put and not flee for their lives, I guess. Even though Israel's trapping people in an open-air prison and launching missiles at them, so they have nowhere to go anyways. He somehow finds a way to twist that and make it Hamas's fault. Just disgusting. This man is an idiot. He gives the appearance of objectivity, right? He speaks really proper. He speaks with these upper middle class mannerisms, and he dresses really nice, and he pretends like everything he's saying is really objective. And really, he's just fact-based. He's just telling it objective how it is. When he's cheering on apartheid and mass murder, he's siding with some of the most murderous, fascistic regimes in human history, who right before our eyes are mass slaughtering kids, babies. There are videos of babies with their heads blown off and completely blown in half by these Israeli missile strikes that have targeted hospitals and targeted churches and have killed well over 700 children. He's cheering that on while pretending to be objective, while pretending to be the adult in the room. Well, I speak like I'm upper middle class. I couldn't be cheering on fascism and apartheid and the mass slaughter of children. Listen to how articulate I am. Idiot. So here were our responses, which thankfully a lot of people are turning on David Pakman now because they realize how terrible his coverage is. Most of his Twitter videos and clips recently have been him coping with the fact that so many people are dunking on him for his absurd pro-apartheid takes. And now we've got some videos calling him out for this that are picking up a lot of steam on TikTok. So here's the first one. I spelled his name wrong.
Water was shut off. I was against that. It's back on thanks to Joe Biden. Reminds us of the importance.
Thanks to Joe Biden. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you.
Of who we elect president. Do you believe that Trump
would have pressured Israel to turn the Gazan water back on.
You know, it's truly incredible how you guys are able to frame everything through a lens that makes Joe Biden look good, or like the lesser of two evils. He's literally sponsoring a genocide right now that's taken the lives of 700 children, but, you know, at least he didn't also starve and dehydrate them to death. Surely we have to vote for him. And I love how Pacman gives Biden, the rich and powerful politician, the credit for Gaza's water being turned back on. It wasn't the millions of people who got out in the streets and demanded that this genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinian Arabs come to an end. It wasn't the protesters, organizers, and demonstrators who pressured Israel and Joe Biden. No, it was Joe Biden himself, because he's just such a good guy. See, this is how liberals frame everything. It's not the masses who pressured a politician into doing the right thing. It's the politician who so graciously decided not to dehydrate Gazan people to death. They never credit collective action and public pressure for bringing out political change, when really that's where all real political change comes from. You better believe these two imperialists would have kept the water off if there weren't mass demonstrations calling them murderers for doing so. They don't care about Palestinian Arabs. They care about their public image and getting reelected. So keep raising your voices, keep demonstrating and calling out the crimes of Biden and the Israeli apartheid regime that he's sponsoring. Don't be a stooge to the American political establishment like this guy.
Water was shut
So
off.
this is what liberals do with like FDR too, right? The reason FDR did a lot of pro-worker policies and implemented a lot of things that were good for the working class was because the workers were organized. There were tons of card-carrying communists in the U.S. Pushing for a socialist United States. After World War II in the late 1940s, there were more wildcat strikes than any other time in American history, where workers just got up and walked out and demanded better benefits. After the Great Depression, there was a huge surge in trade unionism and worker organizations because they didn't want to go through an economic collapse like that again. And they were able to demand that the government make concessions. And the government said, we have to do something for the workers. Otherwise, they're going to demand that we move towards socialism. They're going to abolish capitalism and take away our power. So those good things that were implemented under FDR were really things that organized labor had to fight for, had to struggle for. But what liberals do is they just credit FDR. They just say, thank you, FDR. FDR was such a good president. He gave us this. The rich and powerful give us things. Right? That's the difference. It's not that the working class has to organize and demand things and fight for things. The liberals say the ruling class gives us things because they're so gracious. They're so nice. And that's why we have to reward them with our votes and our support. That's what David Pacman is doing here with Joe Biden, saying we need to reward Joe Biden with our votes and with our support. Because he said he's not in favor of cutting the water off to over 1 million children in Gaza. Like, holy shit, is that the bar now? Is that the bar that we have to, that's all they have to do is not want to dehydrate children to death on purpose and we have to vote for them? But no, the reason that Biden and Netanyahu eventually pulled back on this, and like we said, the water is still off in Gaza, but the reason that Joe Biden said he's against turning the water off is because there was a massive public outpouring condemning him for that, saying, what the hell is this? You've got these people trapped in an open-air prison, and you're going to cut off their electricity and water? Are you kidding me? And people got out in the streets. Millions of people got out in the streets and demanded that this change. And then Biden changed his tune. Biden had to make a statement saying, yeah, I'm not in favor of cutting off the water. So it's not the liberal politicians who grant us these things. It's us who organize and raise our voices and fight for these things. And liberal commentators like David Pacman, liberal grifters like David Pacman, who might as well just be a Democratic Party op, will never, ever, ever understand that because he's not a part of the organized working class. He's not a part of the anti-imperialist masses who want an end to this stuff. He's just a liberal grifter who wants you to vote for Joe Biden and the Democrats year after year after year after year while nothing changes.
Wow, this is unbelievable. In my last video, I covered liberal political commentator David Pakman saying that everybody needs to support Joe Biden because he pressured Israel into turning Gaza's water back on. But as this commenter points out, the water's not back on yet. It's still off. And reports from the United Nations say that Gazan children have now resorted to drinking totally unclean, unsanitary water, which has only made the situation in the Gaza Strip worse as Israel continues to pummel it with missiles paid for by Joe Biden and the American taxpayer. These guys will do anything except condemn the Israeli apartheid state, and they'll use any situation to try and say that Joe Biden is better than Trump. Rather than criticize Democrats for funding the continued seizure of Palestinian land and the creation of an open-air prison in Gaza, these guys find some way to twist this and frame it so that it looks good for Biden. Yeah, sure, Biden is supporting Israel as they cut off Gaza's water supply and carpet bomb the region, but he also did a press release saying that he was against people dying, so therefore he's better than Trump. This is your brain on the American two-party system.
I love that screenshot I got of Pakman. Slavery, this is such a good point. Slavery wasn't bequeathed to us by Abraham Lincoln. It was fought for. Millions died. Yes, it was the result of class struggles. And even, the capitalist class in the North was brought into a class struggle with the slave-owning class in the South. It was a product of class struggles, organized struggles. There were tons of rebellions like the Nat Turner Rebellion and John Brown's Rebellion against the system of slavery, which was its own economic system in the American South for years. There were plenty of rebellions before it culminated in the Civil War and slavery was eventually abolished. Right? These great, grand political changes are things that have to be fought for, and even minute political reforms are things that have to be fought for through collective struggle. But what liberals like Pakman do is remove all that history, remove the analysis of struggle, of class struggle, remove the Marxist analysis, and just break everything down to great men of history, to individual personalities. Oh, something happened with Israel-Palestine? It must be Joe Biden or Netanyahu or one of these great men of history. There couldn't be other factors at play. It couldn't be the mass demonstrations that are pushing Joe Biden into taking a certain position. So that's David Lackman. Biden also did this. I should show you guys this.
Israelis operating within the rules of war that you talked about last week being so important.
Good talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Israelis operating within the rules of war that you talked about last week being so important.
Good talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Wow, this is...
So he just completely dodged the question.
Israelis.
Are Israelis following the rules of war that you tweeted are super important? He just says, good talking to you, and leaves. What's so crazy about Biden and Karine Jean-Pierre is they act like the press are assholes. They act like the press are jerks or are idiots for asking them hard questions. Like, how could you ask me this? How could you ask me this? Okay. And Karine Jean-Pierre gets really sassy with the press when they ask her anything hard. Like, you're committing war crimes. You're committing war crimes. This is what any journalist should ask you. You're doing a genocide. But he's just like, nope, I'm done with you. I'm out. I'm not even going to respond to your completely valid question with an answer. I'm just going to not even comment on the war crimes I'm sponsoring.
Operating within the rules of war that you talked about last week being so important.
Good talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody.
Thank you.
And then listen to the reporters. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Biden. Glot, glot, glot. Like, I'm sorry to be crude, but these people are what a bunch of losers. What a bunch of sycophants. This guy killed 700 children in the Gaza Strip over the last few days. And then one reporter asked him, should this be allowed? Isn't Israel committing war crimes by killing all these children? Didn't you say you're against war crimes? It's like, I'm out of here. Nope. Don't ask me hard questions. And the rest of the reporters like, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Please don't take away my access journalism. It's how I pay my bills.
Good talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you, Joe. Gosh, these corporate media sycophants make me want to freaking puke. He just dodged a question about Israeli war crimes in a week where Israel has killed over 700 children with U.S.-funded weapons. And the majority of journalists don't hold him accountable. They don't demand that he answer for this. They're too terrified that he'll take their access journalism away, that he'll stop giving them interviews, which is how they make their money. It's why Joe Biden and Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre feel that they can be super condescending towards anybody who asks tough questions or just choose not to answer them. It's because they expect the media to act as their lapdogs at all times, when these are supposed to be the kind of people who the media are scrutinizing on behalf of the public.
Israelis,
So that was just unreal. When Karine Jean-Pierre, of course, earlier this week, was asked about Palestinian protesters, who are calling for peace, And she said they are repugnant and disgusting. No, sorry, repugnant and disgraceful. The people who want peace are repugnant and disgraceful. The people who are supporting apartheid and the slaughter of children, those are the good guys. Those are the respectable people, according to the American political establishment. It's never been so clear that we need a revolution in this country from the ground up, a political and economic revolution. I mean, our country's run by psychopaths. Our country is run by people like Joe Biden and his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, Karine John Goebbels, who worship war, who literally think it is repugnant and disgraceful to call for peace. They see peace and peace advocates as disgraceful and repugnant. These are the most powerful people in our country. These are the people who are running our society, who dominate our society, right? These people need to be overthrown. They need to be ousted from power. This country needs a revolution from the ground up. We need to get organized. We need a revolutionary political party leading the way. Not a political party that's calling for people to vote for Democrats because they're the lesser of two evils. That's not what we need. The Democrats are psychotic neocons who think that people advocating for peace are repugnant. They are people who are sexually attracted to war. These are the people running our country and every institution of power in this country. We need a revolutionary movement to get rid of these mass murdering fucks who have captured our society. Humans can do better than this. Humans can do better than Joe Biden and Karine John Goebbels. We can do better than this. We can build a better society than this. We don't have to mass murder children for the interests of multinational corporations abroad. Humans are smarter than that. But we need to get these psychopaths out of power and establish a government that actually works by the people and for the people. Let's talk about, I have another one today. Another segment.
Water was shut off. I was against.
Lemmas are sexually attracted to war too much. They are, I swear. They're friggin', these people have no humanity. They just get off on death. They're psychopaths. I mean, really, that came out of Karine Jean-Pierre's mouth. People advocating for peace are disgraceful and repugnant. Like, I know who's disgraceful and repugnant. It's the people like you who are sexually attracted to bombs being dropped on children. All right, but anyways, this weekend there was a UFC event, really big UFC event, pay-per-view card, and there were quite a few two really famous Muslim fighters on the card, and they both voiced their support for Palestine. So here's the first one. This is Hamzat Chimaev, one of the fastest growing stars in the UFC, Chechen Muslim fighter. And this is, he at one point said, "It's terrible when you see babies dying. I can't watch babies dying. Everybody needs to be against this." And then this was what he said in his own language.
Just say thanks in my country, Chechnya. Allah رزق نوشی مسنا دستی داشت. تمام کس حبه نه تعبول شد و خنک با. بچه Allah رزق
Oh no! Said something to President Zirov. Dang it! Well, now the CIA is apparently jamming our servers, but basically he said free Palestine. He said we stand with Palestine and what Israel's doing is terrible. And he made a big deal about the children who are being killed. He's like, how can you watch babies die and be okay with that? And then he actually asked Kadyrov, the leader of Chechnya, for support or for his approval to go help the Palestinians, to take up arms and help the Palestinians fight back against the Israeli apartheid state. So making it very, very clear where he stands on that. Islam Makhachev is a less vocal MMA fighter, a UFC champion at lightweight, who this week retained his title with a head kick knockout of pound-for-pound great Alexander Volkanovski. And he also took a stand for Palestine in the post-fight press conference.
First of all, always, win or loss, alhamdulillah. And second, I'm not celebrating win today because the crazy thing what happened around the world. Palestine, we stand here with you. All us dua with you. Stop this. Stop this. I watched the story about the situation, what happened in the Palestinian sector.
So it's interesting. He said too, like, I'm not celebrating this victory because of what's going on in Palestine, and then begs the U.S. and begs Biden and begs Netanyahu to stop this senseless violence. And I had a wrestling tournament this weekend, and I won my match, felt pretty good about it. But again, like I felt similar. I'm like, I am excited about this, and I'm going to enjoy this moment. But also, I'm so lucky to even be here wrestling, right? I'm so lucky to even have this opportunity. Kids who are born in Gaza have no opportunity. They're born into an open-air prison where missiles are dropped on their head every day, where they don't have access to clean water from birth. So it just really puts in perspective how lucky we are and how privileged we are. And it makes you think, like, what if you were born in Gaza? What if you were born into that open air prison and you had no other option but to either take up arms and fight back or just die, right? Or try and flee the country and be a refugee, which is what 75% of Palestinian people on earth today are. It's refugees. People have been pushed off their land by the Western imperialist powers in the Israeli apartheid state.
I watched the story about the situation, what happened in the Palestinian sector, Gaza. It made me very sad, because the people in the Palestinian sector, they don't have nothing. They close them and attack them every day. They not kill some terrorists or some people. They kill the kids, old people, and just I want to send the message: stand with Palestine. We're with you, and that's it.
So again, not given a half-assed, I stand with Palestine. Not, I condemn Hamas 800 million times, but, Israel should turn the water back on or whatever. I condemn Hamas, but also Israel shouldn't kill kids, right? That's not what they're saying. They're saying, no, I stand with Palestine. They're saying if I was in Palestine, I'd be taking up arms too. I'd be fighting back too. They're trapped in an open-air prison where bombs are being dropped on women, children, and elderly people, where 97% of the water is undrinkable, and they're trying to cut off the little water and electricity that the Palestinians still have. And they've been cutting off cell phone access or any kind of internet access so people can't report on the Israeli crimes that are going on. All right, these UFC fighters are unequivocally standing for Palestine, probably because they're from the Muslim world and they're less susceptible. I mean, both these fighters are from Russian areas. Kamzat from Chechnya, Islam from Dagestan. They're probably not being subjected to the same kind of Western corporate media propaganda that we're beat over the head with every day. But yeah, and then I also wanted to point out that Palestinian fighter Bilal Muhammad was pictured with a Palestinian flag alongside Hamzat Chimaev. And Bilal didn't fight this weekend, but I wanted to give him a shout out because he was actually a lawyer before becoming a fighter. And he's one of the loudest advocates for Palestine. He doesn't just advocate for Palestine recently with the current events. He does it like every fight, right? He says free Palestine and points out what's going on, explains that Gaza is an open-air prison where children are being killed on the daily, explains how Palestinians are systematically deprived of basic rights by the Israeli apartheid state, right? He is the most consistent advocate for Palestine in MMA, in the UFC, and he often gets attacked for it. So I wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to Bilal Muhammad while we're talking about UFC fighters who stand up for Palestine. I wouldn't want him to be overlooked because he's done so much for this struggle. And like I said, he's often smeared and attacked by the media, by other UFC fighters who are Zionists or just ignorant loudmouth idiots like Sean Strickland, which I actually made a video about that earlier because Bilal made a tweet saying stand with Palestine, and ignorant, uninformed Sean Strickland, UFC loudmouth extraordinaire, was mad about it.
UFC middleweight champion and professional loudmouth Sean Strickland responded to a Palestinian MMA fighter Bilal Muhammad saying, "Pray for Palestine." He said, "This is a coward response. Instead of taking a stand against terrorism, you say this." And then somebody rightfully pointed out to Sean the amount of Palestinian land that's been occupied and stolen by the US-backed Israeli apartheid state. And Sean says, "Well, too bad. My nation took this land at gunpoint. That's just how it works, man." Oh, isn't that interesting, Sean? So when America takes land at gunpoint, that's just how it works. But when the Palestinians take their own land back at gunpoint, they're terrorists. Buddy, you can't preach this might makes right bullshit and then cry like a baby when the Palestinians rise up and start taking their land back. Congrats, Sean. You played yourself. You've been exposed as an utter hypocrite with no logic behind the arguments you're making. Stop trying to use the Palestinian struggle for clout. You don't know what the hell you're talking about.
So these are the UFC fighter takes on Palestine. I'll share this one if you guys want to boost it or send it to Sean Strickland and ask him if he has any comment. I had another viral video about Jordan Peterson earlier, and I just kept sending it to him on Twitter and saying, "Do you have any comment about this, Jordan?" He didn't get back to me, but maybe Sean Strickland will. He oftentimes responds to people on Twitter. But so yeah, this is the MMA world's response. A lot of the Muslim fighters are taking an educated position, standing with Palestine. And then you have one loudmouth American and Sean Strickland who pretends to act like an expert on the conflict without knowing what the hell he's talking about. So you always got to have one. Always got to have one bad egg in the bunch. And I don't even hate Strickland. I think he's kind of funny, but like don't speak on geopolitical issues if you haven't read on them at all and sound like an expert and attack other UFC fighters who actually have taken the time to understand these issues. You're just embarrassing yourself. And the other thing is he called Bilal Muhammad a coward for saying pray for Palestine. Right? No, that is the position that's going to get him attacked. Right? Saying pray for Palestine is what's going to get him canceled. That's what got Mia Khalifa canceled. That's what people are losing their jobs for right now, especially at universities, right? That's what's going to get you attacked by the corporate media. That's what's going to get you attacked by these Zionist organizations who keep tabs on Palestinian advocates and smear them as supporters of terrorism, right? That's what's going to happen to Bilal. You can say pray for Israel all day. And in America, nobody's going to get mad at you. Nobody's going to care. That is the mainstream position. That's the position of all the most powerful people in the country. That's the position of the most powerful bankers, the most powerful shareholders and multinationals. The position of every powerful politician in the country is the position that Sean Strickland is parroting, right? But he wants to say Bilal Muhammad is a coward for standing against that. For standing against every powerful institution in the country? No, that's what takes courage. What takes courage is standing up against the rich and powerful who are justifying genocide, murder, and apartheid. It's easy to go along with what they're saying, to just go along with their narrative of, Hamas bad, Palestine bad, they're terrorists, which is what Sean Strickland is doing. So in reality, Strickland is the coward and Bilal Muhammad is the courageous one. But Strickland tries to turn reality on its head and say, no, you're a coward for standing up against the American political system. No, Sean, you're siding with the Zionists. You're siding with Joe Biden and the murderous American empire and the American corporate media. You're the coward, bitch. Sean Strickland's not actually a bitch. He's very tough. But But he took a bitch-ass position on that issue. All right, one more thing here on TikTok. This is my last piece of planned content for today. So I just wanted to show you guys this. I made a video well before Israel bombed Al-Ali Hospital, saying Israel is warning doctors to evacuate because they plan to bomb hospitals. This is before the hospital was bombed. I said, watch out. Israel is planning to bomb a hospital. And look what TikTok did. And I understand this is sensitive content that some people may find disturbing. It is about a hospital, right? But what this does ultimately is suppress my content and make it so my content doesn't show up on people's For You page. Make it so my content isn't showing up for people and it isn't going viral, right? How interesting is it that a video where I predicted the hospital bombing was going to happen is one of these videos that TikTok suppressed and didn't allow to go viral? This has much less views than the vast majority of my content about this issue.
The hospitals in Gaza are being overrun as Israel has continued their indiscriminate bombing attacks that have killed hundreds of civilians, including many children. And now we're getting reports from MSF International, a human rights organization that sends doctors all around the world, that Israel has given them 2 hours to evacuate Al-Auda Hospital, where they're currently treating victims, presumably because Israel plans to launch missiles at or around the hospital. Which is just insane, considering the hospitals in Gaza are already overrun and running out of beds and doctors. This is what the U.S. gives Israel $3 billion a year to do. And it's why Palestinians were eventually fed up and took up arms and fought back. MSF International has condemned the Israeli apartheid state for their actions and calling for them to evacuate the hospital, as much of the media still somehow finds ways to blame this on the Palestinians and paint them as the aggressors. But never forget, it is the Palestinians who are living in an open-air prison and who have had most of their ancestral homeland illegally seized. This is the part that the U.S. media doesn't tell you, because the U.S. has not only been complicit in this, they've sponsored and funded it every step of the way. At least since 1967. It was mostly Britain prior to them. So you're not innocent either, UK. Stand with Palestine.
It's just so absurd, man, that the Al-Ali Hospital gets hit and 500 people die. And the American corporate media and all these liberal political streamers like Destiny are like, oh, it was a Hamas rocket that misfired and hit the Al-Ali Hospital. Like, first of all, Hamas doesn't even have that kind of firepower. You guys are idiots, and you're showing that you don't follow the conflict at all. The U.S. has $3.8 billion in state-of-the-art missiles from the U.S., and they have an Iron Dome defense system to intercept Hamas rockets, whereas Hamas literally oftentimes has jerry-rigged fireworks that they're firing back at the Israelis. And then a missile goes and blows up an entire hospital, and you think it was a Hamas firework and not an Israeli missile. So that's stupid in and of itself. But then, if you were actually paying attention, you would know that all week Israel was threatening to bomb a hospital, right? There were international human rights organizations
Took up arms and
sending doctors to help with the hospitals, like MSF International, because they were being overrun. And Israel said, get out of there. We're going to bomb the hospital soon. Because they didn't want to actually accidentally kill some Americans or accidentally kill some human rights officials or human rights workers. They just wanted to kill Palestinian Arabs in the hospital getting medical care. All right, so then Israel hits a hospital and blames it on Hamas, and so many of these idiots like Destiny fall for it. And it's like, dude, they've been telling you they're going to hit a hospital all week. How naive can you actually be, Destiny? How naive can you be? How far up your own ass is your head to not see that this was Israel? They were literally saying out loud, yeah, we're going to hit a hospital. We're going to bomb a hospital. You better get out of there. Even though there's nowhere for the people in Gaza to go, especially people who have their limbs blown off by Israeli missiles. They need to go to the hospital, which you'd think would be a safe place. You'd think Israel wouldn't stoop so low as to bombing a place where people are getting medical care. But they did, and they said they were going to. They straight up said it. They told us out loud we're going to bomb a hospital. Then they did, and the corporate media said, "Oh, how could Hamas do this? How could Hamas do this?" Like, geez. And then you have, what bugs me about people like Destiny and these centrist liberal political streamers is they're pretending to be objective. They're pretending like they're smart, and all the people like Hassan Piker who are taking the obvious position of standing with Palestine are idiots and evil and are supporters of Hamas, and they're just not as objective as me, Destiny, the pro gamer who's never read a book in his life. And it's so infuriating. You people aren't objective. You're siding with apartheid. You're siding with the murder of children, and you don't understand the conflict at all. You don't understand the military situation here. You don't understand that Hamas doesn't have the firepower to blow up a hospital. They don't have that kind of weaponry. There's only one country that does, Israel. So they get $3.8 billion a year from the U.S. and missiles that they constantly drop on Palestinian kids. But these people like Destiny don't even follow the situation. They just play StarCraft all day and then read a few corporate media articles and give a half-baked take anytime a geopolitical conflict goes down. That's literally Destiny's whole thing. Sits around playing StarCraft all day or doing debates. And then, you know, when a geopolitical conflict comes up, he reads the corporate media and tries to take the centrist position, tries to take the most objective position that isn't going to lose him any followers or fans. But when you're reading the imperialist corporate media, the centrist position is going to be a disgusting, murderous, imperialist, pro-capitalist position, which is where Destiny always finds himself while pretending to be an objective centrist. I had a video go viral about him, actually, because apparently people agree.
The political streamer Destiny doesn't believe the Gaza death tolls, and he says, is there a single non-Gaza source confirming 500 dead? And this is a tweet about a hospital in Gaza that got hit with a missile strike. So why would there be a non-Gaza source reporting on Gaza? Gaza's an open-air prison. It's blockaded in. How is somebody who's not inside of Gaza supposed to report on the church that blew up inside of Gaza? Are you waiting for freaking Ireland and Japan to report on the number of dead people in Gaza before you stand up for the Palestinians? No, at this point, I don't think anything would get Destiny to stand up for the Palestinians. All he's done.
So if you didn't catch that, the Gaza Health or the Palestinian Health Ministry said 500 people died in this hospital attack. And Destiny said, why isn't there any sources outside of Gaza reporting on this? I need a source outside of Gaza. When the hospital that got hit was in Gaza. So anybody who's reporting on that needs to be in Gaza so they can see the hospital that blew up. So it doesn't even make sense what he's saying.
Done is conflate the entirety of Palestine with Hamas, downplay the Israeli missile strikes on the Palestinians, and smear and attack any popular voices like Hassan Piker who are standing up for Palestine against genocide. You have no idea.
And shout out to Hassan. You know, I've had my criticisms of Hassan, of course. The dude has been fire when it comes to Palestine. The dude has been taking the right position. He's been getting on really big news shows like Piers Morgan. And he's been using his platform to call out the Israeli apartheid state and stand up for Palestine. I love it. I was talking earlier about Jackson Hinkle, another guy who I have my disagreements with. Jackson and Hassan hate each other. I love what both of them are doing. I have disagreements with both of them that are probably, you know, completely different. But I love what both of them are doing in favor, in support of Palestine. I'll gladly like and share what they're doing when it's the stuff that I agree with and that I think is good. And of course, Destiny has been crying like a little baby about Hassan's coverage of Palestine. Just having a complete meltdown and calling Hassan Piker a Hamas agent or whatever, because Hassan has the courage that Destiny doesn't have, and the background knowledge and the understanding of the Palestinian struggle that pushes him into a position of supporting Palestine.
Idea how Hassan's fan base lives with themselves? I could say the same for your fan base, dude. You speak on these issues like you're an authority or an expert, but you don't know the history of the colonization of the people of Palestine and the seizure of their land. You don't know about the Nakba or the calamity where 75% of them were pushed into refugee status. You've never read Norman Finkelstein's Gaza, an inquest into its martyrdom, or Ghassan Kanafani's Palestinian Children, or Edward Said's The Question of Palestine. How could you take the time to read those books? You play video games all day and run your mouth. Does anyone truly think?
And someone says, why are we talking about Destiny right now? Well, first of all, who gives a duck? Well, 350,000 people watch this video. And if you read the comments, it's turning a lot of people against Destiny. There are a lot of people who thought Destiny was a reasonable, rational voice, an objective political commentator, not someone who sides with imperialism and murderous apartheid. But this video exposed to them that Destiny is, in fact, that he is an imperialist. Look how many comments there are and look how many likes they have, right? But more importantly than that, Destiny serves as an example of what a lot of these American political streamers are. As I'm about to go into in the video, they're just people who use these issues for clout, or they try and, like I said earlier, take the centrist or objective position on this based on the information they're being fed by the corporate media. But they're not political scientists. They're not academics. They're not reading about these issues. They're not deeply studying them like me and Carlos and Noah at least try to, right? They're playing StarCraft, collecting a bunch of Patreon money, and just talking shit about controversial issues to garner clout.
Think this guy can wrap his head around the oppression and the trauma that Palestinian children are experiencing right now as Israeli missiles are raining down on them. And this is a major problem with all political streamers. Like, when I wake up, I feel like I owe it to you guys, the audience, to be educating myself, to be reading, to try and learn something so that I have something valuable to share with you all. These political streamers like Destiny, who are probably just in it for the money, don't feel that way. They just like to play video games and talk shit. So when an issue like Israel-Palestine pops up, it's really obvious to the people who are educated how ignorant these folks actually are. They just speak confidently and it gives them an air of authority. But they should really set down the video games and pick up a damn book.
So, and for me too, like, I get that not everybody cares about Destiny and the other political streamers. But for me, as somebody who does this, who creates educational content for the internet, these are my contemporaries. These are people who do the same thing as me. And when I see them playing video games all day and making these horrendous, half-baked, uneducated, ignorant takes about the most important events going on around the world, it's like, what's wrong with you, bro? You have this platform, you have this audience, you have these people who are willing to listen to you, and you don't feel an obligation to them to actually be well-read, to actually study and try and understand the things that you're talking about. Like, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I read for at least an hour a day, you guys. I read for at least an hour a day, scholarly sources or books. Carlos reads for more than that. Noah reads a similar amount, even though he works full-time, and he has to wake up at 4 a.m. to do so. And oftentimes I'll read 3-4 hours a day. The day of my wrestling tournament this week, I had a match. Before my match, I was reading for like 2 hours, partially because it helped put my mind at ease, but mostly because I want to be educated. I want to actually have some real knowledge to share with you guys. I actually want to be able to tell you the historical context behind these issues that the media constantly covers up and constantly lies about. And if you don't read, you can't do that, right? If I don't read, I'm just reacting to the corporate media articles that I see with my gut, with my emotions, the same way, a political normie might be, right? And that's not what a political educator should do. That's not what a streamer should do. And, I like to play video games too. Yeah, I like to relax and shut my brain off sometimes. But most of my time is spent reading and studying and educating myself because I feel an obligation to. Right? Because you guys wouldn't come to me for information just because you like the way I look. Maybe some of you would. But most of you feel like I'm studying and reading and you like the way that I convey information. So if I just stop studying, stop learning things, stop engaging with people who are smarter than me, what knowledge do I even have to share with you guys? What's the point? I'll just be like a Destiny. So that's my main beef with people like that. Why I always make fun of them for not reading and just for playing so many video games. Because, again, video games are fine. I love video games. I've been addicted to video games at points in my life, but some of these guys are just gaming and gaming and gaming. It's like, when do you have time to read if you're gaming this much? Keep up the good work, Eddie. Glad to catch a stream after the past 2 weeks. You bet, Fine Art Revolution. Thank you. I'm glad to be back doing the streams. Thanks so much for the $5. Follow Fine Art Revolution on Instagram if you haven't already. Yeah, I had someone said they missed the long form Eddie content, so I'm like, dang, I got to do a stream today. Got to get back on the streams. It's always fun to break these issues down in depth and engage with you guys back in some back and forth and some dialogue. I love the TikToks too, and they're getting millions of views and bringing in, 50, 60,000 new followers to Midwestern Marx, which is great and is going to help us fight this information war and fight this ideological battle going forward. That's so important. And subscribe, by the way, if you haven't yet. But yeah, I also love engaging with the hardcores, the people like you. Because a lot of our TikTok audience, like you saw with that Destiny video, there were a lot of Destiny fans watching my TikToks, being like, wow, this really changed my mind about Destiny, right? That's the TikTok audience, whereas the YouTube audience, you guys are mostly politically educated or theoretically educated, at least a little bit. You're probably less inclined to trust someone like Destiny at all. So the conversations that we have on here are a little bit deeper and more in-depth, but the conversations we have on TikTok are able to reach a wider audience and change more hearts and minds, at least initially. Although I do want to get people into the YouTube audience, because then we can really change hearts and minds by teaching people theory and teaching people Lenin's imperialism and teaching people about Marxism and the Marxist worldview. So it's a give and take. TikTok reels them in. TikTok is like the bait, and YouTube is like the fishing pole where I draw you guys in, and before you know it, you're commies. Oh, geez. Guess who ran over his foot with the forklift at work? Then hilariously, my belly hit the emergency shut-off switch. So the forklift was on top of my foot. No, Cobra, you got to be careful, my boy. Oh, man. Every day, Cobra's having a near-death experience at work, it seems like. There is just... OSHA is non-existent wherever Cobra Commander is working. The other day, he was jumping on top of a shredder, trying to get a couch inside of it, I believe, or something like that. And then today, he didn't break any bones because of his combat boots, but he got run over by a forklift. So within the past month, Cobra Commander has almost gone through a shredder and been run over by a forklift. So pray for him. If there's, one example that the proletariat is overworked and that working conditions under capitalism are too dangerous, it is Cobra Commander. He is the prime example of this. True proletarian. I'm going to get extra stoned today. You earned it, my friend. You earned it. I hope I hope that helps the pain in your foot. That forklift is anti-communist. Clearly it is. And an employee turned it on and ran away. They fired him and wrote me up. Oh my gosh. So this was intense. Wild. In the old days, some workers would intentionally injure themselves. Would they, just to get off the job? I mean, that makes sense, dude. If you're working like 12-hour days in the factory, like when you read Marx's Capital Volume 1, when you get to the middle, it's like the working conditions. He's going through these factory inspector reports that are writing these people hired by the British government to talk about the conditions of people in the factories and even in different industrial jobs. It's just atrocious. Like, girls and women and children locked in a room sewing things for like 12 hours a day, every day, 6 days a week or 7 days a week. Like, there were no rules. When they say that everything had to be fought for by the working class and class struggle, that is for 100% true. Right? There was no 40-hour work week. There were no worker protections. And kids and women and children and men, of course, were just being worked to the bone, worked to death in the mines and the factories, and in these new industrial jobs that came about with the Industrial Revolution. And And it makes sense that if you were trapped in that situation, you would do anything to get out, including injure yourself. I mean, I remember when reading Capital Volume 1, I started to get anxious and started to get claustrophobic. I'm like, oh my gosh, they were locked in the factory 70 to 80 hours a week. Little girls were locked in the factory just sewing things and working in the textile mills, threading things for 60 to 80 hours a week. Like, I don't know what I would do, but you have no choice. That's the only way you can get food. That's the only way you can get a wage and survive. And the peasants were slowly being pushed off of their land and having their land expropriated by capitalists and by landlords. So more and more people, as feudalism transformed into capitalism, more people were divorced from the land and pushed into the cities. So they couldn't grow their own food anymore the same way they had for thousands of years. And their only choice was to sell their labor, to become wage laborers, which is the main mode of work and mode of life and relation of production that exists under the capitalist system. So it's just like you're trapped there. You're trapped there 80 hours a week, or you're going to starve. That's the onset of capitalism. All right, I'm going to do something unprecedented here, you guys. Now that we're at the more casual part of our stream. There's this girl I like, and I'm trying to convince her to like me too. So I'm going to send her a video of me doing our stream. Hopefully she'll be impressed. Everybody smile. There you go. Hopefully that Snapchat works. What should I caption it? The Eddie Liger Power Hour is on point today. I don't know. What do you guys think? What should I caption it? I need some help. I need some advice. I'm so lonely. Just kidding. Roses are red. Free Palestine. With the communist homies. That's a good one, actually. I've never showed her my streaming setup before. It's always weird. Like, I almost don't, when people ask, like, what do you do? I almost don't want to be like, part of what I do is create content. I always start with, I'm a wrestling coach and I do this and that and that. And I'm trying to make the Olympics in wrestling. Then just beg, and maybe I make some TikToks every now and then, make some YouTube videos. Well, I do a show. Don't ask me more about it till we get to know each other better. And that's just when it comes to girls, though. Most people I'll be happy to tell about my streams. Eddie, are the pedo claims on Stalin true? No. Thank you so much for the super chat, Andres Dixon. Appreciate that. Stalin was actually pretty straight edge, I guess, for lack of a better word, when it came to like his views on sexuality and stuff like that. Some might even describe him as homophobic. To an extent, which he can be critiqued for, but it was a different time, of course. Yeah, Jacob, I'm pulling up your video now.
Pay them back in your...
Oh, I shared that video on TikTok. Yeah, everybody watch Jacob's. Everybody's been asking me to do a reaction to the Marxist, or to the oversimplified video on the Bolshevik Revolution, and I haven't gotten around to it, but Jacob did one. Jacob did like a full breakdown of the oversimplified's take on this, and I did a TikTok about it, but check it out. It's really, really good. This is basically, it's very similar to what I would have said if I broke it down. I'm not going to react to it all today. I might take little clips of it and react to them at some point because it's a really well done video. So congrats to Jacob. Good job, Jacob. Everyone go watch that and then subscribe to Jacob's account, the Statesian Bolshevik, because like I said, he's got the same Marxist-Leninist perspective as Midwestern Marx, but he covers different stuff that we haven't gotten around to covering yet. So which is why we all need to educate ourselves in the Marxist-Leninist worldview and all do what we can to wage the class struggle, to wage the struggle against imperialism. Some people have video editing skills. You might have musical skills. You might have organizing skills. You might have communication skills, right? And there are different ways that you can put these skills into action and utilize these skills to further the class struggle. That is what Jacob is doing by starting his YouTube channel and debunking bourgeois propaganda. It takes time. It takes effort, which is why I haven't gotten around to responding to this video, and I appreciate that Jacob has. Cobra, $10 educational Riz. Thank you, Cobra. Appreciate you for the super chat, our fearless moderator. I hope you don't need that $10 to take care of yourself after you got run over by a forklift, but thank you so much for the $10. Let me know if you need it back. I'll send it back to you. I want to help you with your forklift injury care. Wait, you made a TikTok? How come I didn't see it? I don't know, man. That's weird. I definitely did. I mean, I've made so many TikToks in the past few weeks about Palestine. It's probably buried now, but I'll make another one. Here, let me remind myself to do that, though. I have a to-do list today, and I will add making another TikTok to my to-do list. Maybe I should tell this girl that my show is the most popular show on the internet. Yes, I'm going to say the most popular show on the internet, in parentheses, don't look that up. The Eddie Liger Power Hour. The most popular show on the internet. Don't look that up. Boom. She'll love that. And she'll love me. Welcome to the Eddie Liger dating hour. The Eddie Liger speed dating hour. Our first segment will just be Eddie trying to riz someone up on Snapchat. Our next segment, people from the audience will start dating each other. Ready, go. Hey, babe, did you know I've been banned from TikTok like 7 times? That's a good one. That also just makes them go, why? Then maybe they think I'm a conspiracy theorist or something. Let's go, LMAO. That's what's up. We in here. Ooh, people are excited about this. People are excited about Midwestern Mark speed dating. We might have to make this an actual event. We want to do a live meetup event so bad. Like the Revolution Report conference that I went to in Chicago was so cool. And I just feel like Midwestern Marks could put on a similarly awesome event. Get people together in real life and talk about organizing strategies. I'm married, not happening. That's all right. Not everyone has to participate. Say Liger in French. Leger. Leger. Eddie about to show up to a date with 87 people. So many dudes. Yeah, we looked at our analytics the other day. It's like 90% dudes. I was like, no, we need some diversity in our audience. Shout out to the ladies in the Midwestern Marks audience. Shout out to like Molly McGuire and Jenny Lynn, and there's a few of them. I don't know if any of them are here today. Eddie, what games do you play? This is gonna sound lame. I mostly play old school RuneScape. I really like RuneScape. I played it as a kid with my brother, and now I play it because it helps me relax. I can listen to podcasts or even read while I play it, and it just gives me nostalgia and reminds me of playing with my brother on my parents' PC when I was in grade school. And yeah, I don't play that many video games anymore, so that one has been enough to keep me entertained for a while. Guy, hold on. Somebody on the internet called Stalin a mass murderer. That's literally me. I got girls like, come on, show me attention. I'm just like, hold on. Somebody was talking shit about Venezuela. Like, I don't care. I do not care. I'm like, well, I do. This is what I do. GTA is an anarchist fantasy. Have you played Stalker? I have not. I'm about to get back into Neopets. Oh, there you go. That's something I used to play as a kid a lot. Oh, there's Molly. What's up, Molly? Shout out to you. Glad to have you here. I hope we can get some more females in the audience at some point. I just started going on Twitter, and that sums it up pretty well. Eddie, you're a great man. Keep up the good work. You bet. Thank you. Keep up the fight. Yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Eddie, what's the number one thing you can do as a Marxist-Leninist? I feel powerless sometimes. True. You can. I mean, the number one thing I think that you can do in the U.S., and don't get me wrong, praxis is important. Organizing a real communist political party is important. Doing community organizing is extremely important, and some people are extremely good at it. I always shout out my comrade on TikTok, Comrade Mick, or Comrade Red, she calls herself sometimes. Incredible community organizer, making huge gains and appeals to the public for communists in her area, making doing all these community organizing events where she's handing out food to people, right? I think that is probably one of the number one things you can do, one of the best things you can do. But not everybody is in an area where there are other communists or where that's going on, and I recommend people try and start that, try and form that. That's what we want to work up to, because honestly, that's probably the best thing you can do. An ounce of practice is more than a pound of theory or whatever. If you can help people in your community and get people in your community to think, man, when my employer isn't doing enough for me, when the system isn't doing enough for me, when the system leaves me behind, the communists are there for me. The communists are in my community handing out diapers and handing out food and doing mutual aid and looking out for the people and cleaning up the streets and making our community a better place to live. If you can do that, like my friend Comrade Red does every single day, Comrade Mick, then that's the best thing you can do. But a close second or tied for that is reading theory, right? It just is. People like to downplay the importance of theory, say you don't need to read any theory. Theory is not all that important. Theory is so important because theory gives us a path to organizing, right? It shows us what we need to do in order to organize class struggle and build a better world. But also, we live in America. We live in the belly of the beast, where we are surrounded and indoctrinated day after day after day with imperialist propaganda, right? I just finished reading Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality, which is about the news media. And now I'm reading Michael Parenti's Politics of Entertainment Media. What's it called? I can't think of the name of the book. Media book. Make-believe media. And this book explains how both the political media, the news media, and entertainment media like movies, TV, and video games is constantly indoctrinating us with anti-worker, pro-capitalist, pro-imperialist ideology at every single turn. They're telling us that, power corrupts. That's one of the main things they beat over our heads. Power corrupts, so don't get organized and try and seize state power. Don't try and make anything better by getting the workers together and seizing power, because it's just going to corrupt you anyways, right? Anti-union rhetoric is constantly pushed on us. We know that pro-imperialist ideology and rhetoric is constantly pushed on us by all these different media apparatuses, by the entertainment media, by the news media, by everything. We have this ideology pushed on us, not to mention by religious institutions and our family and the education system and the culture. So reading theory helps us be immune to this. Vijay Prashad says that reading Capital gives you a shield against bourgeois ideology, right? It helps you deconstruct bourgeois ideology and see the capitalist system for what it really is. See capitalist imperialism for what it is, and take more educated, well-informed political positions based on that. It makes it much, 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 much harder for the imperialists to lie to you, right? Because you know they don't actually care about human rights in the Middle East. You know they don't actually care about people in the Middle East. They care about oil. They care about resources. They care about control. They care about having cheap sources of labor, right? It all stems from capitalist exploitation, which allows them to accumulate capital, right? When you understand capitalism's mechanisms and the motivations and interests of the ruling capitalist class, you understand their political policies a lot better. You understand their propaganda a lot better. And theory, this is what theory allows you to do. It allows you to deconstruct the propaganda and not fall for it. It allows you to stand against imperialism, stand against war, even when the corporate media is beating the war drums, right? So it's so vitally important for people in the West to read theory. And yes, you need to combine that theory with practice, right? You need to do actual organizing, which is informed by that theory. And then our organizing can in turn inform the new theory that we develop. But it is so important that you don't write off reading theory, that you don't say, I don't need to read theory. That's for intellectuals. That's for academics. No, there's so much important theory that you should read. Start with Lenin, start with Engels. They're easier than Marx, but it will help you understand the world, and it will help you change the world. There's my buddy Kyle Pettis tells a really good story. He was in the Dominican Republic, and he asked the communists there, who are much more organized than American communists, what should we do? What should we do in America? And they say, well, what we make fun of American communists for is the fact that you guys have a new political party every week, right? Every week there's a new American Communist Party, and they're like, we're going to be the vanguard. We're going to be the leaders of the revolution. We're the real Communist Party. And it's like, that is not it. You know, they said you don't need another party. What you need is people who are educated theoretically, right? You need to take a group of really dedicated people who want to change the world and change the system. You need to teach them Marxism, train them in Marxism, train them in theory, train them ideologically for like 3 years, and then send them into the workplaces, right? Then send them into the communities to organize people. So you have people whose organizing is informed by theory, people who aren't going to fall for imperialist propaganda or pro-capitalist propaganda because they have this theoretical base. They've deeply studied politics and the capitalist system, which is really what Marxism is the study of capitalism and the study of changing modes of production over time and the study of political change. So reading theory is super important. The long story short, sorry to give you a 1,000,000-page answer to your one question of what can I do as a Marxist-Leninist because I feel hopeless. Understand it's not hopeless, and by reading theory and educating yourself and educating other people around you who are curious, you can make a huge difference. You can drastically change the course of this country. You can make yourself an incredibly effective political organizer. See, the liberal ideology also tells you that there's no point to reading. There's no point to understanding history, right? There's no cohesive history. History is just driven by great men doing great things. But that's not the case. History is driven by collective struggle. And by educating ourselves and educating others and organizing and being conscious about the way that we struggle, not just struggling blindly, but educating ourselves about the system we're in and how to struggle against the system's ruling class, we can change history. We are powerful. We have limitless potential as human beings. And part of what the pro-capitalist, bourgeois, doomerist propaganda, individualistic propaganda tells you is, no, you can't develop yourself. You can't come to understand the system. You can't actively engage and struggle against a system that changes it for the better. Just give up. Don't you know that power corrupts? Even if you guys seize power, even if you seize power of the government, you're just going to be corrupted and start murdering each other immediately. So don't even try. Don't even try and change anything. Everything's fine the way it is. That is what the liberal propaganda tells you. They try and make you feel hopeless, but it is not hopeless, right? If it was hopeless, our TikTok videos about Palestine and socialism wouldn't be getting millions and millions of views. to be honest. So, you know, and one thing you got to tell yourself is think about how much energy and time and resources the bourgeoisie spends on suppressing American socialists and suppressing anti-imperialism and banning TikTok accounts like ours and busting up different political movements. Think about all the resources they put into COINTELPRO to try and infiltrate left-wing movements and destroy them, right? They did that because they know we do have the power to bring about a revolution. We do have the power to bring about change. We do have the power to overthrow the ruling class. So they need to spend all their energy and time and effort suppressing us and making sure that we don't, right? If they believe that we can change the system, if they believe that we can have a revolution, then we should believe it too, right? If the ruling class believes that the working class can overthrow them, then the working class should believe it too, right? And if they didn't believe that we could overthrow them, they wouldn't be spending so much time, money, and energy on suppressing us and trying to infiltrate our revolutionary groups. It is what it is. Chomsky was okay, I thought you said Chomsky destroyed Foucault. I'm like, okay, listen, I like Chomsky probably more than I like Foucault, but that is not what happened. No, Chomsky was destroyed by Foucault. He was. It's weird. It's a hard debate to watch. I don't like Foucault that much, but Chomsky just didn't understand what Foucault was trying to tell him in that debate because Chomsky didn't understand dialectical materialism, and Foucault at least had a basic understanding of it. Yeah. If your idea of a better society is Mao or Lenin, then you should read more. Mao and Lenin brought about the fastest increases in standard of living that have ever been seen in human history. China is still the fastest growing economy on the planet, where over 90% of people, or close to 90% of people, support their government. And over 70% of Russians now want to return to the Soviet economic model, because they believed it was superior to the capitalist economic model that was induced upon them. And, you know, if you want to compare, and Jacob talks about this in the video about the Russian Revolution that I just recommended to you guys. If you want to compare what Russia was like under the Tsarist monarchy compared to what it was like under the Soviets, it's not even close, right? There was a reason that the Russian Revolution happened, because people were sick of starving to death and being sent to fight and die in these expansionist imperialist wars for the Tsar, for the monarchy that dominated Russia. The Soviet Union brought literacy in Tsarist Russia from like 17% up to 99.9%, eventually 100%, right? They provided healthcare, they provided housing. And yes, there were shortages originally. And yes, you know, a lot of the Soviet economy needed to be diverted towards military spending because they were preparing for the Nazi invasion, which eventually came and who they eventually repelled and defeated, right? But still, every metric that measures standard of living for working people and for the working masses was improved under the socialist government. So speaking of which, I just realized I got to head out soon because I have a meeting with Jubilee at 3, that account where they have people like debate certain issues. They want me to come on and maybe advocate for communism against some capitalists. And they have like 8 million subscribers. So I better head out and get ready for that. But RJ says, it's crazy how once you have a solid theoretical framework, it becomes so obnoxious that world events are actually easy to understand, but presented as if so complex that regular people could never comprehend it. Absolutely, RJ. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the $20 super chat. An amazing, amazing comment here. This is basically what Marx says in the German ideology, that, you know, we can understand history if we understand the historical events that bring something into existence, right? But with this great man of history fallacy and the isolation of different historical events that the bourgeois press does and the bourgeois education system does, it makes history overly complex and overly hard to understand. Whereas a Marxist class analysis makes things easy to understand, makes historical events more comprehensible for anybody. So, all right, I got to head out now, folks. I better get ready for this meeting. Thank you very much. Oh, I'll definitely share the link to the debate. I mean, like I said, they have like 6 million subscribers, so it'll be pretty easy. Or you guys will definitely see it, and hopefully it'll allow our account to blow up. But yep, I better go take care of that. Thank you all for everything. Keep fighting the information war. Solidarity with Palestine. Solidarity with the Midwestern Marxists out there. We'll see you next time.